This new collection of recycled plastic bottle rugs is quite a new venture for us, but it's something that I think is so important to address. And while using plastic and recycling it is not sort of the ultimate answer, we obviously need to think about not using so much plastic, not generating it in the first place. At this time, we have all this plastic waste, and it's great to find new products that we can actually repurpose that for.
Welcome to the D and A of Home Interiors. I'm Audrey, founder of Audrey Whelan Interior Design.
I'm Deirdre, the co-founder of Cool Dia.
We're here to help you make confident home interior and furnishing decisions.
So today we're delighted to have Claire Godey on here with us on the podcast. Claire is an artisan textile designer, creating rugs, cushions and fabrics inspired by nature. And Claire, I'm really intrigued to hear a little bit about the business, how you got it started, what inspired you. But I found a quote that I'm going to start off with, and it's titled Designed by Nature, but you talk about nature has always been my biggest inspiration. Observing its rhythms of light, shadows, colours, textures and scale, and understanding its effect on our well-being is something that I'm instinctively drawn to.
Yes. Well, nice to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the podcast. So I grew up in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and I guess just being surrounded by nature, having a dad who was a fisherman, so being out on the sea and really living life at the beach, if you like, is something that's always been with me very instinctively. And since I've began working with design and colour, I really draw on this, and I think about the changing environment, so how the weather and the tides and these kind of natural rhythms and cycles can really influence how we see things around us. And along with that, how we see things and the colours that we see and how that really affects how we can feel. And I guess a comparison is if you're stepping out on a really grey day, it doesn't feel nearly as uplifting as a nice bright sunny blue day or something like that. So, and of course that's a very personal thing. Colour is very personal. I'm sure we're going to talk more about that. But for me, the landscape around Guernsey is something that I find really, really inspiring. And I think it's something that really affects how we feel, and our experience in the home can be really driven by that. We can take things from that kind of natural environment and bring that into the home to actually benefit our emotions and our behaviour and generally how we enjoy the space we live in.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I just love, how you describe your inspiration behind your designs. And I think at the moment it's so topical because people are really connecting that idea of sort of like well-being and how your home is and what you can introduce into your home to help that feeling of well-being and happiness and sense of pride in your home. So I think your rugs definitely fit into that. But I'm also so interested in the fact that not only do you look at that side, but also the fact that you work a lot with sustainable materials, and in particular your rugs that are made from plastic bottles, which I was so curious about when I came across them on your website. Could you tell us a bit more about that product in particular?
Yes, of course. I think nearly all of the collections are actually in natural materials. So this new collection of recycled plastic bottle rugs is quite a new venture for us, but it's something that I think is so important to address. And while using plastic and recycling it is not sort of the ultimate answer, we obviously need to think about not using so much plastic, not generating it in the first place. At this time, we have all this plastic waste, and it's great to find new products that we can actually repurpose that for. So this collection of rugs is made out entirely of recycled plastic bottles. We use non-toxic dyes for the colouring of the yarns. And between us, we've just been looking at some samples, and I think everyone will agree that the feel of them is so much like wool.
Yeah,
you really wouldn't know the
incredible
difference. It's a wonderful fibre that can be generated out of something so hard and crisp and crackly like the plastic water bottle to then become something so kind of tactile and soft that you would want to sit on, stand on, have in your home as something quite tactile and much more warming.
Yeah, well, that's what I was so surprised by, because I was also very curious about the idea that these could be used outdoors and that their water resistant properties, would be really ideal for that. So I was therefore expecting it to feel a lot more kind of synthetic and to look a bit more, plasticky as the material would suggest. So I was so pleasantly surprised by that, although it's got that durability, it could also be in a very luxurious setting, and, it doesn't look at all like it comes from a plastic origin. So I think that's really incredible.
Yeah, and so because of them being waterproof, they can obviously be used in kitchens, bathrooms, other areas of the home, which you wouldn't necessarily put a wool rug in. If it gets wet, it doesn't really matter. We just recommend that they're dried fully afterwards to maintain their longevity, and they're beautiful, durable, woven pieces for the home, which really add to any kind of interior scheme because of the colours, the patterns, the textures, and lovely product, and feel like you're doing something really good by using up some of this plastic waste that's become something beautiful again.
Yeah.
And it's amazing for our listeners out there. So Claire has very kindly brought in lots of samples for us here. And we have been, we actually did a little test before we began, trying to decipher if we could say which one was wool and which one was made from the plastic bottles. And I actually couldn't tell. So the feel of them and the look of them, you really are not, compromising on the quality or the design or the pattern. So it's amazing. But maybe stepping back a little bit, Claire, for somebody who isn't a rug knowledge person, what are the different types of rugs that are out there that you can even consider? So we've talked about the plastic bottles, sustainability ones, we've talked about wool, but what other types are there out there? And keen to figure out as well then, how does that come into maybe the different places, the different rooms in the house that I want to use a rug? Because we've mentioned some get wet and some don't. What do I think about?
Okay, so a lot of people's choices when deciding which rug to buy comes down to colour, pattern, context, so where you want to put the rug, and probably also the feel of the rug. So in terms of describing different types of rugs, there's a lot of different weaving techniques which are used. So you can have rugs which have been tufted and they create that soft pile underfoot, so they're quite springy and they have a very nice sort of textural, deep, quite sumptuous feel.
What does tufted mean?
Tufted is the way it's woven. So it's actually a more modern technique which has been created to create a more affordable rug and create a sort of a finish which is very similar to the very original ancient art of knotting a rug, which is done entirely by hand on a loom, on a warp, where individual threads, hundreds and hundreds of them, are kind of knotted around a warp. And then you cut the threads in order to create this, again, a beautiful, soft, springy pile underfoot. Now, tufting uses a handheld tool whereby the weaver will press these yarns into a backing cloth and then fix them there with a latex backing. So it's very much done by hand, but with the aid of a tool, and then you've got this additional layer on the back of the rug, which makes it a little crisper in feel, a little sturdier in thickness, but you've got something that's quite a different price to the hand-knotted version. So it's giving people choice. The feel of the rug is slightly different as well. So it's really kind of down to preference and budget as to what's available.
So is when you just mentioned about price there, Claire, so is the tufted the less expensive option?
Exactly, yes. So the tufted is is less expensive. I'd say about, let me think, half price. Not quite, but
of a hand knotted.
Yes, so you are looking at a significant difference in price because of the time it takes to really make something by hand.
Yeah.
And then you've got loom woven rugs, which have more of a visible woven structure to them. So these we've been looking at and talking about. The recycled plastic bottle rugs are woven on a traditional shuttle loom, with the weaver passing a shuttle backwards and forwards through the threads. And that creates something which is a thinner rug, and it's also got a nice sort of detail of structure and pattern in the weave. So it's a different look. It's, again, a preference.
Yeah, it's kind of a flatter. It's like
it's
a flatter look,
feel.
isn't it?
Yeah, so you feel that texture underfoot rather than that sort of springiness of the pile.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of materials that can be used to make rugs, and we focus predominantly on natural fibres. So use a lot of wool, which is a really nice biodegradable product. It's also a sort of breathable insulator in the home. It's quite it's got acoustic properties. It's just a lovely, very nice fibre to experience. We think it's something that's as humans, we're quite sort of innately connected with natural fibres. There's something quite authentic about them. Mm-hmm. But again, we might use bits of, we might use a bit of linen to weave in, or a little bit of silk or viscose or something that's got that bit of sheen to it to create a contrast in the textures.
And you've got one sample here that I'm touching at the moment, and it's got little lines going through it, but it seems to be like a velvety material.
Yes.
And my hand is just drawn to the velvet because it feels so soft. What is that?
That's actually a little bit of viscose. So we just use that for a bit of detail in the rug to create a contrast, because it's another really nice touch of design when you've got that contrasting texture, both visually and to feel. So like you say, it feels like velvet, but it's also got a shine to it. So you get a really nice reflection of the light and change in the colour and tone the way you experience the rug.
It nearly looks like 3D. And I'm thinking of this
like
other sample as well. We've got, the two different textures in it. So it just brings it to life, I suppose, more.
Yes. I mean, it accentuates the pattern in a way by using different weaving techniques. So the one you were just mentioning has got a loop pile in amongst the cut pile. So that just variation in surface texture creates a bit more interest and sort of depth and layering in terms of materials in your home, which is all really adds to the overall effect, I think.
Yeah.
Adding contrasts of texture as well as colour and things like that can really add to the atmosphere.
Absolutely. And just kind of going back to, the question that Deirdre was asking about the different rooms and, what might influence those decisions. And I suppose a lot of that is also probably centred around the durability of the different materials. So you mentioned sort of, obviously people might start out looking at colour and maybe pattern, working out what it is that they want visually to kind of fit in with the ideas that they have for a particular room. But then, I've noticed working with clients over the years that often people would be hesitant about a rug. So they love the idea, the colour, the pattern, the texture, everything ticks all the boxes, will look great. But the thing that's holding them back is, the durability aspect, the question mark about that, whether it's that they've got young kids or they feel like it's in a living room with kind of high traffic going around. So they're actually tempted to kind of live without that rug and maybe just a wood floor, which I always think is, such a shame. So what would you say in terms of durability and what the sort of materials then are right in that situation?
Sure. Well, one thing I would say is that wool is a wonderfully durable fibre. So in terms of which rooms, wool can be easily placed anywhere, high traffic areas such as the hallways or living rooms. And then that creates a really beautiful soft surface for children to play on as well. The other consideration a lot of our customers ask about is with underfloor heating. Which rugs should they choose if it's for on a hard wooden floors, which so many of us do choose nowadays to put a rug on there. Our recommendation is go for something a bit thinner. So go for the flat weave rugs, which are the ones we're talking about that are quite textured and woven with a pattern, or the knotted wool rugs, because they are a little thinner and a shorter pile, because then you're not trapping so much heat under the rug. But also if it's a natural fibre, then you're actually allowing that heat to absorb into the fibre and then be sort of breathing into the space as well. So wool is a good breathable insulator. So it is going to allow the heat to kind of move around a bit more, especially if it's a thinner rug. Something like the tufted rugs, which are quite a bit thicker and they've got that extra latex backing layer, that can almost create a bit of an obstruction of the heat, if you like. So you might think about where to place it, if so, and perhaps not have a rug that then fills the entire floor, because obviously then you're kind of your heating isn't going to be as efficient as it could have been.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of considerations from a practical point of view.
Yeah.
The recycled plastic bottle rugs, because they can be wet, they can be washed. So that's a really nice extra add-on, whereas a wool rug, you wouldn't necessarily wash the whole wool rug because you're going to probably degrade it a little bit.
So that's a good option then for people who are maybe concerned with the practicalities.
Definitely, because then you can always wash an area of the rug or the whole thing if you need to.
So I suppose looking at that care and cleaning factor, how is the best way to look after the rug? And I have this old-fashioned image of a lady with the rug thrown over the washing line, and she's got the baton or whatever she's doing to beat out the dust. How should we keep them really, really fresh and good looking? I suppose, sun could have quite a damaging effect, I imagine, as well, which people would often forget about.
Yeah, and I think beating them over a washing line is quite a hard work way of dealing with it. So using a vacuum cleaner is the best way of taking care of it, and without any sort of brush attachments that can cause any hooks or pulls on the rug. Just hoover it probably once a week, keep it nice and fresh. Wool will naturally trap in any kind of dust and fibres near the surface, so you can easily vacuum that out. In terms of light, then yes, all colours in bright sunlight have a tendency to fade over time. So perhaps rotate the rug periodically so that the colours, if they're going to fade slightly, it would be quite even. But you will find that colours on wool and also on the recycled plastic yarn are pretty durable and quite resistant to damage by sunlight. So that's a really nice another thing to think about with these particular fibres.
One thing I'm so curious about in your work is, so you talk about, like we said earlier, the connection to nature and well-being and happiness, and a big kind of buzzword around this at the moment is biophilia. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about, what biophilia is and how you link that in to your work.
Yeah, so biophilia is really our human connection with nature. And this being something quite innate and something very much that's happening all the time. And the way we draw positive experiences from references to nature. And biophilic design is about bringing nature's references into the home and into the built environment in order to create a measurable and a really kind of positive benefit to the space and to the people that are actually experiencing that space. And it could be the very more obvious elements, such as bringing plants in, bringing water features even, having natural airflow, natural light and beautiful views of the countryside. But in addition to that, there are indirect references, which is something I'm really fascinated by. So this idea of drawing colours from nature and patterns that we see in nature, which is sometimes referred to as biomimicry. I can get the words out. So this idea of really taking inspiration from nature and bringing that into the materials and patterns and colours and designs that we use in our homes, with the purpose of their bringing a positive effect. It could be because of, we just have this appreciation of nature. And I think there's so many of us would recognise that you can be walking around in a park, walking around in a woodland and feeling quite at ease and just enjoying that kind of atmosphere. It's something that we feel quite connected to, that we perhaps can't even explain particularly.
Yes.
And certainly there's more and more studies are showing that this is something that's very much affecting our experience. And if we can bring these kind of elements into our homes and workplaces, and then we can actually bring a lot more emotional well-being into our spaces because of that. So a lot of the colours I work with and the patterns I work with, going back to this idea of inspiration from Guernsey, it's again taking colours that I see around the coastline and a lot about this play on light. So the nature around us is constantly changing. It's rhythmic, but it's random at the same time. So you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. The colours transitioning. So I use a lot of colour gradients, patterns in nature. So the sort of irregularity of the granite reefs around the coastline. It could be to do with patterns on the leaves and shells and this kind of thing, which can be sort of translated into design work. And it does seem to be that those sort of organic forms are the designs which people are more drawn to and choose.
Yeah, that's what I found really fascinating, actually
reading
like a blog post that you have on your website about biomimicry. Is that right?
Yeah.
Biomimicry? Yeah.
Mimicking nature.
Yeah, so mimicking nature. Yeah. And I think because, I feel like there's so much talk at the moment about biophilia. Like I said, it feels like a real buzzword in interiors at the moment. It's cropping up, like say on Instagram, people who kind of blog about interiors, it's a word that's being used a huge amount, and I guess more and more people are maybe being exposed to that concept. But biomimicry is a word, I have to say, that I hadn't seen used so much in terms of interiors, and so I thought that was really fascinating. It was something that really resonated with me, although I haven't tended to use that word before. But the reason why we're drawn to certain patterns more than others, and the reason why a person may feel more comfortable with certain patterns and then be kind of almost terrified by other ones, and the fact that this is actually connected back to, pattern we see in nature. So maybe there's a little bit more you can tell us just about that pattern and how you translate that into something then, in your products.
Yeah, so biomimicry can be anything from quite a literal translation, I would say, patterns of leaves and sort of jungle prints. And I mean, we've seen a lot of that in interior trends in recent years. Yeah. And I think the way I work is perhaps more subtle. So I'm thinking more about the detail of patterns and the coloration of things from nature. And things like sort of tessellations. So you might see ripples on the water, or feathers and the way they sort of align themselves together on the back of a bird, or the movement of clouds and changing colour and light, and the way that sort of fluidity can come into a design through the use of lots of tones of colour, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think it can be quite literal, or it can be a little bit more abstract. And again, that's very much a personal preference, as whether somebody really wants quite a high maximalist feature wall with floral wallpaper, for example, or something that's got a more sort of non-rhythmic pattern that we might find in nature, or something that's got a sense of movement to it, a sense of transition in colour, or just that sort of kinetic feel about the pattern, but not something quite so obvious.
I know what you mean, the abstract versus the more literal. So as you say, it's not a jungle print or print of leaves, but it's actually something, more abstract, where you don't necessarily know where the pattern stemmed from. That's maybe not the important bit, but the important bit is that it makes you feel very much at ease when you look at it.
Yes, or how you want to feel. So whether that be at ease, or you're looking for something to decorate a dining room area that you want to be a bit more vibrant and social, it's very much about tuning into your own emotions and how a particular design and coloration really makes you feel, and your emotional connection to that. And that's what you should be choosing to put in your homes, not necessarily something that you've seen in the magazine because it looked great in the glossy imagery, but actually, does that really resonate with you? And is that how you want to feel in your home? And what do you want the space to do for you? How do you want to behave? And all of those things will come into your decision as to what you choose. And for some people, that is a more abstract pattern that's got some sense of something which has a story to them. They might attach their own meaning to it. I've got customers who will say it reminds them of this particular holiday, or this idea of memories of things, positive memories, which we have these kind of learned connections with colours and different elements of materials and things like this. So it's very much a personal, individual experience when you're choosing things for your home.
So I find that fascinating, because when you're looking to buy a rug, I suppose I always sort of am drawn to the pattern, to the design on the rug. But having learned so much around the different types, the tufting, the weaving, the materials, what do you find are the key buying decisions that customers actually look at? Are they looking at the weave? Are they looking at the type of the rug? Are they looking just at the pattern and that emotive connection, or do they incorporate many factors?
One of the most important things for most of our customers is colour. And color is just one of the first things that any of us react to in any space, even if we don't realize. And usually people will be drawn to a rug design or a fabric design, firstly because of color, and then they'll perhaps look in more detail at the pattern. And we do have a lot of customers who are interested in how things are made and the craftsmanship side of things as well. But I would say first and foremost, it is color. And color is such an emotional and individual thing that it's about, like I was saying, really about exploring kind of which colors are going to make you feel the way you want to feel in that space. In your home to kind of nurture you. It's your retreat. Your homes are a story of ourselves, aren't they? We kind of curate them with things around us that we want to be with, to make us feel good. So
exactly.
And colour is such a big driver in that.
So I'm intrigued because often I have this vision in my head, but to find that in reality can be very, very difficult. But you actually do custom made rugs. So if somebody has that colour in mind, they can come to you and you can work to create whatever's in their head.
And they can indeed. And a lot of customers really like to be involved in that process as well. So we have a number of customers who will get in touch and say, I like this rug, but can you change this colour? Or can you make the colours a little softer? Or can I send you a swatch of my curtains so that you can match that rug to my fabric? And that is exactly the way we work. Because nearly all of our rugs, well, they're all handmade and they're all made one by one. So it is no problem at all to change elements of the rugs. So we can customize the colors, we can customize the sizes. We have a number of hundreds and hundreds of color references at the studio. So we can work with customers to match up to get the tone right for them. So it's exactly what they need. And then we can, as I say, we can change the fibers of some of the things, some of the rugs as well, depending on what's needed. And while the customer is then waiting for that rug to be made, we try and share photos that have come from the weavers in India or wherever it's been made, so that they can share in that journey as well while they're waiting, because it takes quite a long time to make a rug by hand.
So how long are we talking about?
You're talking about 12 weeks.
Okay.
So while you're waiting for your rug and you're wondering when is it going to arrive, we can send updates, and they love that. Customers love seeing that journey of their rug, the yarns being dyed, the rug being woven and then being finished, and then obviously it arrives in their home. And we love it then when customers send us photos back saying, here it is in situ, and it feels good because they're so happy with the result.
Yeah, and that's great that they can be kind of part of that process then to really see the journey behind the rug that will end up being in their home.
And because we can create, from the beginning, we can create visualizations using photos of their room, putting the rug that they want into the space, so they can really see how it's going to look beforehand as well, to give them sort of confidence that it's exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And obviously approving all the colour samples and things like that. So it's a really nice creative process where customers can be as involved as much or as little as they want, really, with our guidance.
So can they actually look at tufts then so they can see the real colour of what will end up being in the
It's
rug?
really difficult to match colours on a screen. So it's so important that customers will borrow our rug samples so they can see the quality of the weaves and the texture and what it's going to actually feel like, and also see the actual yarn tuft. We have all these colour poms, so they can see what they actually look like in the space.
Yeah.
And if people are local to us, then they can come to the studio. We can visit them at home. Or if they're a bit further away, then we can send things via post back and forwards. That's not a hindrance at all.
Yeah.
So people can, absolutely can actually get the colours right, hold them right up against their paint in the wall, and really look at it in their lighting as well, because light obviously affects the way we see colour.
Yes. Yeah.
So by them actually seeing the colours in their room is the best way for them to know if it's the right results.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, is it a shame, given this work of art is so beautiful, that we're going to put it on the floor and we're going to potentially cover it with furniture? Do you find that you have people that maybe use the rugs in a more unconventional way? And the thing that comes to mind for me is tapestries. So putting them on the walls.
Yeah, it's becoming more common for people to hang rugs on the walls.
Historically very
yes.
popular.
Yeah.
And they're such beautiful things, aren't they? And to be able to walk past and touch that and to actually have that very material thing in the space as a piece of art is lovely. I mean, I don't think of my design work as art, but I think it's why name what's going on the wall. If you want to have something beautiful on the wall that's got a very tactile, material, textile texture, then that can look lovely. And it's just got so many acoustic properties as well.
I was going to say, if you've got a big echoey space, and I'm still touching the viscose and stroking. Like if I was walking by this, I would happily just be running my fingers through it the whole time. It's like sort of addictive.
But it's quite soothing, isn't it, as well? There's something quite relaxing about that. If you haven't got a cat, then you can have a rug.
Yes. So actually sitting on it would be quite nice as well, like actually sitting on the rug. But it's interesting that you brought up the question about art, because actually I often talk to clients about like a rug being a piece of art, but on the floor, to think of it that way, because sometimes I feel, you know, if I present a concept to somebody that has a rug in it with quite a large scale pattern, I think because we've moved away from sort of patterned carpets, which for, you know, people of my vintage, it was sort of a big feature of my childhood, kind of patterned carpets.
Mine too.
So there's kind of a fear built in there. So if anything kind of looks like a carpet and has a pattern, for some people, like I've found I need a new way to describe that. You know, so actually describing it as a big piece of art on the floor is a way that I've kind of communicated sometimes, just a different way of kind of looking at, you know, what this object is. And so then, you know, if it's a big abstract pattern, maybe like we talked about earlier, you know, that is something that, you know, could be on a wall, even if it wasn't a rug on a wall, you know, obviously a big painting or something. But sometimes people don't have the space in a room to have a, you know, really large piece of art on the wall. So it can be a great way to bring something in another way. But also I do think sometimes, you know, you can bring patterns in that maybe might feel overpowering on the wall because it's at eye level and it's a real focal point kind of when you walk in maybe. Whereas on the floor, particularly because, you may have a few pieces of furniture kind of on it or around it. It's just a softer way, or can be softer way
You're
to
sort
bring
of diluting
in pattern.
it, if you like, by breaking it up with furniture or other pieces. But I think in that similar way that art can be such a great addition to a space, because you're adding colour and pattern and sort of visual stories into the space, the same way a patterned rug, however sort of busy and flamboyant the design is, you're getting little hints of colour and all of that sense of the way colour is used in the space and the proportion of colours that are used. It can be a really lovely way to bring in little touches of accents of colour or something that can be more grounding as in the overall space. So it is a lovely way to describe it actually, as in that sense of putting something on the floor that's there for a visual appeal and use of colour and pattern in a different way.
So how do you think about it when somebody comes to you and they've got a space and maybe they're unsure what size the rug should be? And one thing I always think of, should the furniture be on the rug? Should the furniture be off the rug? Should it be half on? Does it depend on the pattern? What are the key things to think about?
There's so many different schools of thought on this, and we've just published something on the website in our useful tips as well, actually, because it's something that everybody will consider before buying a rug, is how big it should be. And I think one thing I would agree with, as a general rule of thumb, it could be as big as you've got the budget for, in a way. Sometimes if your rug is too small, you can create a slightly awkward feel, like you haven't quite filled the space and you've got furniture sort of floating around the edges. As for should all the furniture feet be on the rug, I think that will depend on the individual space. You might want to be consistent and have kind of everything half on or everything fully on. I think you need to think about how the size of the rug feels in the space sort of proportionately. So you might want to fill quite a big area to create a sort of zone in the space and create a social seating area, perhaps with your sofas and armchairs in a living room, for example. Or in a dining room, you might want it to be under the table and enough room for the chairs. That's quite a key thing. Make sure there's room for your chairs to pull out, and test that yourself. Don't go with measured guidelines that say you should have 60 centimetres allowance outside the table. Actually, get up from a chair, move away from the table, see how much space you generally need in your space, and then make sure the rug extends that much further from the table, because otherwise your chair is going to be sort of dropping off the rug and hooking on it or tripping somebody up. I would think also just in that idea of proportion in a space, if your rug is going to go right towards the edges of the walls, then it might start to give it a sense of feeling a bit crowded. So while you want it as big as possible, generally, don't push it to the absolute limits, because it might just feel like you've tried to squeeze it in a bit too much. Give it a little bit of breathing space around the edges.
Because it can be quite nice with whatever your flooring is underneath, assuming that you don't sort of hate that floor, that you actually want to equally show off a bit of that floor, and then you gain that contrast between it being maybe a hard surface in a contrasting colour, for example, and then the rug.
Definitely.
Nice
and that's why I think focus on a sort of an area or a zone in the room. So typically a rug would be placed under your sofa and under your coffee table and creating that space. But then you might have, if you've got a room that's big enough, you might have a little bit of an area that you enter into the room or somewhere else within the room that's exposing that hard flooring. So exactly as you say, you've got that lovely contrast.
Claire, I'm really curious to know, as a designer myself, although I design spaces and obviously you design products, I'm so curious about your creative process. So when you're coming up with ideas for new rugs, I'm wondering, how do you work? How do you develop these ideas? Is it the kind of sketching, mood boards? Do you work on computer or by hand? Sort of what's the behind the scenes to these finished products that we see?
There's lots of ways I enjoy working. I will take photographs of the natural landscape. I will sketch ideas. It might be mark makings from that. I might put mood boards together, have a design wall in the studio where I just collect all sorts of materials and images and bits of colour that I'm drawn to, that I can explore. And that's very much an organic design board. So it just changes day to day as I move things around. I collage with paper as well. I do work on the computer, but that's usually further down the line. So that's once I've got ideas together and I'm exploring something in a bit more detail. And I work a lot at the loom. So I weave the samples for fabrics and the rugs as well. So I might actually change out colours on the loom in the warp, or just try mixing different materials and yarn types together. And when you mix different colours and different fibres together, you get quite different results. So it's like an alchemy in a way. You're working with perhaps 1 or 2, 3 colours, and as soon as you start combining them in different proportions and with other colours, they become something quite different. And I'm all the time trying to think about what that feels like, what that design feels like, what kind of emotional response to it, and then trying to place that into the end room where I can envisage it being used in someone's home, and how that's going to actually affect the space and kind of that will steer the design journey, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Claire, I wanted to touch on a little bit of practicality. I want to talk a little bit about price. Now, I've had some interesting conversations, and there's 2 schools of thought which have become apparent to me. And the first is that people realise that the workmanship that goes into a rug, and they can understand that they're buying a high quality product. And there's another school of thought where, because we've been bombarded with so many cheap, unsustainable products that have been sourced at mass, economies of scale, they see the price of a quality product and they're like, oh my God, it's so expensive versus, what I can buy in Tesco. Mm-hmm. And I very much view a rug in the same way that I would view this is going to be the carpet equivalent cost. Do you see that with people? How do people react to cost, and do they realize the quality and the products and the sustainability and the durability that they're getting, rather than buying something off the shelf potentially?
Our customers do, and I think it comes down to the idea of how long it's going to last, as well as knowing that it's been made ethically, responsibly, with no child labour, and it's something that people have been paid fairly to make, and they appreciate. We include some video on the website as well, so people can see actually how long it takes to create these pieces crafted by hand in such an ancient traditional skill. And I think when you realise that some of these hand-knotted rugs are going to last for generations, you're buying something that's kind of a family heirloom, if you like. It's going to last quite probably longer than your sofa. So, and because it's something that's not fixed to the floor, you can take it with you from home to home. You can easily use it in rented or in your own home, it's the same. And I think it's got so many advantages to it in that way, and its long-lasting durability as well as the craftsmanship side of it, that I think people start to appreciate the cost that they are. And actually we keep our margins pretty tight, so it's not like we're marking things up enormously. It's a very fairly costed product, which is has high quality yarns, has all of that skill involved.
Yeah, just to add just in on that, I mean, as a designer, like an interior designer, I've always been made so aware of, the issues surrounding child labour and rug production.
Yes.
So that's something I've often raised in conversation with clients who I found wouldn't always be aware of that. So when it comes to the price point of rugs, this is obviously a really important thing to note. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit more on that.
Yes, and I think it's not just the rug industry as well, but all of our rugs are made in collaboration with Momo Rugs, a Netherlands-based company, and they have 40 plus years experience that they bring to this collaboration, and we partner with them, and they sort of work with us, with the manufacturers, and are also endorsed by the Care and Fair Initiative, which is an organisation which is very much against child labour. And so sort of profits from the industry actually go to ensuring that there are no children involved in making any of the rugs, that families are supported in terms of medicine, hospitals, education, and fair living wages and living conditions, etc. So that's just only one little element of our collaborative partnership, which is brilliant. So I think it's something that more and more people are becoming aware of, not just with rugs, but with products across the board, that we have to ask who's making our products, who's making our clothes, who's making our technology. And if initiatives like Care and Fair can be more talked about, then people can know what to look out for as these kind of endorsements that means it's a good and fair, ethically made product.
Yeah, so would you say then most companies who are producing ethically would have that listed on their website then, that they're affiliated?
Yes, there are a few similar organisations. So Goodweave is another one that you will see, and Label Step and Care and Fair, they're the three key ones that come to mind for rugs in particular. But and if in doubt, ask your company that you're looking at buying from, ask them to tell you about it, where's it made, and the sort of provenance of the product.
Yeah.
And they should be able to tell you quite freely.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very good question to ask, isn't it?
My mum always said you pay for what you get, but I feel like there's a bit of an education point out there, because actually buying a rug is an investment. And I think the proper price comparison to make is actually, am I going to carpet the space? Or maybe am I going to put down new wood and flooring? And all of a sudden then you realise the type of money that you should be spending, because you're going to get such a long life, durable product, which of course, as you mentioned, you can actually pick up. So once you put down a carpet, I'm thinking, I've got my underlay costs, then I've got to put down the carpet, I've got to pay for the fitter. So that adds up to a lot of money. So you're probably looking at a rug in a very different light when you're considering that you can have it personally made, customised, for your space, your taste, your family, your lifestyle.
And you've got the versatility, so you can move it from room to room. If you decide to redecorate, you can reposition it. And yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, so Claire, I'm conscious we're coming to the end of our time together today, and I just thought before we wrap up, it would just be great to find out a little bit more about, where you're planning to go from here. So for people who might be looking on your website, obviously we've discussed the rugs in detail. I believe you've got a few other products as well. And
yes.
Are you planning to expand from there?
Yes, so there's many new products coming in the pipeline. We've got additional fabrics that we're working on development at the moment, with hand-woven fabrics for upholstery. And obviously that will feed into an additional line of cushions as well. And also some new rug collections with hand-spun jute and some other ideas that we're developing. We're also expanding the idea of the custom-made rug. So we're looking at putting together some custom colours in boxes that our reps and different showrooms can work with clients that aren't local to the studio or don't want to work by post, so that we can have more options for people and more versatility to choose different colours for their home, which they can personally select and tailor for their spaces.
Wow, that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I have to say it's been fascinating talking to you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, learning all about the business and seeing these samples of rugs in the flesh as well. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been really inspirational.
Thank you. And I think it is really important to see the samples. So we always encourage customers to get in touch and request a sample. We can send out our returnable samples so they can actually just see what they feel like. And like we were saying with the recycled plastic bottles compared to the wool, it's such a similar feel, and it's important to have
everybody
the
would be
real
surprised
thing.
with that.
To see it.
Yeah,
for
that's
yourself.
a really good tip, and great for people to know that. Okay, yeah, thanks again, Claire.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please like and share with your friends and family who are working on their own home interiors project. Be sure to follow us on our Instagram, Facebook and YouTube channels at the DNA of Home Interiors.
If you are looking for inspiration and help in designing your home project, check out Audrey Whelan's masterclasses and sign up for one today. And Audrey, what's that address again?
It's audreywhelan.com/events.
And it also makes a great gift. And don't forget to check out cooldia.com to easily search, discover and shop furniture products across the entire retail market on one website. We hope you can join us next time.